I found out about my father's will reading from an email I was never supposed to see. It was not even sent to me. It was forwarded through 3 different people, buried under subject lines that had nothing to do with me. But at the bottom, there was one sentence that made everything else irrelevant. If Ethan shows up, do not let him in. I stared at that line longer than I should have. Not because I did not understand it, but because I did. This was not a mistake. It was not someone forgetting to include me. It was a plan. A clear, deliberate decision to keep me out of something that had my name written all over it. For a moment, I considered doing exactly what they expected. Stay quiet. Stay out of it. Let them handle it the way they always had. Without me. But then I thought about the last thing my father said to me. And suddenly, staying away did not feel like an option anymore. My name is Ethan Carter. I am the only one in my family who did not go into the family business. That alone had always been enough to put me on the outside. The Carters own a network of private clinics across the state. What started as a single medical office turned into a chain that generated more money than anyone in the family ever imagined. Over time, the business stopped being something we built together and became something people fought to control. My sister worked in operations. My cousin handled finances. My uncle made the big decisions. Every conversation eventually circled back to expansion, revenue, and control. I chose something else. I became a paramedic. I worked 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer, responding to emergencies most people only saw on the news. Car accidents, heart attacks, people collapsing in places where help was never supposed to be needed. To me, it mattered. To them, it was a waste. "You are throwing your life away," my sister told me once. She said it calmly, like she was offering advice I had somehow missed. "You could be running clinics instead of riding in an ambulance." I remember looking at her and wondering if she had any idea what it meant to hold someone's life in your hands while everything around you fell apart. But I did not argue. I almost never did. The only person in my family who never questioned my choices was my father. At least, not in the way the others did. He asked questions. He listened. He did not always agree, but he never made me feel like I was less because of it. That changed near the end. Not suddenly. Not in a way you could point to and say, "This is when everything shifted." It happened slowly, in small moments that only made sense when you looked back. After his diagnosis, the house felt different. There were more meetings, more conversations that stopped when I entered the room, more paperwork on the table that I was not meant to see. One afternoon, I came home between shifts and found them all gathered in the dining room. My uncle was leading the conversation. "This is about protecting what we have built," he said, his voice measured, controlled. My father sat at the head of the table, quieter than usual. Not disengaged, just listening in a way that felt distant. I noticed the documents in front of him. Financial statements, ownership structures, transfer agreements. "You are moving things around," I said before I could stop myself. The room went still. My uncle looked at me like I had stepped into a space that was not mine. "This is not something you need to worry about," he said. Not loud, not aggressive, just final. I looked at my father. He did not respond. That was the first time I felt it. Not exclusion, something sharper. Control. After that, it became harder to ignore. I stopped being invited to discussions entirely. Decisions were made without me. Information moved around me instead of through me. At first, I told myself it made sense. I was not part of the business. Why would I be involved in business decisions? But then I started noticing things that had nothing to do with business. My father's personal accounts were being reviewed more frequently. Assets were being restructured. Properties that had never been mentioned before were suddenly part of ongoing conversations. One night, I came home late after a shift and heard voices coming from his office. I was not trying to listen, but I heard enough to make me stop. "We need to finalize this before anything changes," my cousin said. "What if he pushes back?" my sister asked. "He will not," my uncle replied. "Not at this stage." There was a pause. "And Ethan?" my cousin added. Another pause, longer this time. "We handle that separately," my uncle said. That was the moment something settled in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Recognition. I did not belong in whatever they were doing, and they wanted to keep it that way. A few days later, I walked into my father's room and found him sitting by the window, looking out at the garden like he used to when things were simpler. "You have been busy," I said. He smiled slightly. "So have you." I sat down across from him. There were things I wanted to ask, about the meetings, about the documents, about the way everyone was acting like something had already been decided. But I did not know where to start. Instead, he spoke first. "Do things feel different to you?" he asked. I hesitated. "Yes." He nodded like he had expected that answer. Then he said something that did not make sense at the time. "If something ever feels off, do not ignore it." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He looked at me for a moment, then shook his head. "Nothing. Just trust your instincts." I let it go. I should not have. A week later, I noticed something else. He had started writing things down. Not notes like reminders or appointments. Detailed observations, names, dates, short sentences that felt too deliberate to be casual. I saw my name a few times, mostly connected to visits, times I came by, how long I stayed. Then I saw their names. My sister, my cousin, my uncle. Next to them were notes that did not feel like casual observations. Short visit, asked about accounts. Focused on paperwork, no personal conversation. I stepped back before he noticed me reading. I told myself it was nothing, but the feelings stayed. A few days after that, I saw something that stuck with me more than anything else. He had a small external drive, black, unmarked, always within reach. He did not hide it exactly, but he never let it out of his sight either. Once, when I walked in unexpectedly, he quickly placed his hand over it, not panicked, careful. I did not ask. That was a mistake. The last real conversation we had happened late at night. I had just come back from a shift, exhausted, covered in the kind of fatigue that does not go away with sleep. He was still awake. "You should rest," I told him. "So should you," he replied. I sat down anyway. We talked about nothing important, the weather, work, small things that filled space without needing to be meaningful. Then, as I was about to leave, he said something that stayed with me. "People show you who they are when they think they are running out of time." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He held my gaze for a second longer than usual. "You will understand." Those were the last clear words he said to me. A few days later, he was gone. The house filled up quickly after that. Relatives, colleagues, people I had not seen in years suddenly appearing, offering condolences that felt rehearsed. But beneath all of it, there was something else. Movement. Conversations that happened in corners. Decisions being made quietly. Documents changing hands. Everything felt efficient. Too efficient. Like they had already planned what came next. I barely had time to process the loss before the focus shifted completely to the business, to the assets, to what needed to be done. No one asked me what I thought. No one needed to. Then came the email, the one I was never supposed to see. If Ethan shows up, do not let him in. I sat in my apartment reading it over and over again. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to avoid the confrontation, because I already knew how it would go. They would say I was overreacting, that I did not understand, that this was not my place. And for most of my life, I would have accepted that. But something had changed. Not in them, in me. I thought about the way my father had been watching everything, the notes, the conversations, the things he did not say directly but made sure I noticed. If something ever feels off, do not ignore it. I looked at the email one more time. Then I made a decision. I was going. Not because I expected anything, not because I thought I would suddenly be included, but because I needed to see what they were trying so hard to keep me away from. The morning of the reading, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my head. The meetings, the documents, the way my name came up in conversations I was not supposed to hear, and that line, do not let him in. By the time I got to the building, my hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I would feel nervous, angry, something. Instead, I felt clear. Like whatever was about to happen had already been set in motion long before I showed up. The lobby was quiet. Too quiet. When the elevator doors opened, I saw them immediately. All of them. Standing together near the conference room, talking in low voices. For a moment, no one noticed me. Then my sister turned. Her expression changed instantly. Not shock, something closer to irritation. "Ethan," she said, a little too sharp. "What are you doing here?" Every head turned. I met her gaze. "I am here for the reading." There was a pause, heavy. My uncle stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of the others. Not aggressively, just enough to make a point. "You were not supposed to be here," he said, not even trying to soften it. I let out a small breath. I did not realize it was invitation only. "It is," my cousin said from behind him. I looked at him. He would not meet my eyes. "This is for immediate family," my uncle added. Something tightened in my chest. "I am immediate family," I said. No one responded. They did not have to. The message had already been clear. Then a voice cut through the silence, calm, professional. "Are we here for the Carter estate?" We all turned. The lawyer stood in the doorway, looking between us with the kind of expression that suggested he had seen situations like this before. "Yes," my uncle said quickly. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding. He was not supposed to be included." The lawyer frowned slightly. "Including him would not be a misunderstanding." He looked down at his notes, then back at me. "Your name?" "Ethan Carter." He nodded. "Then you are exactly where you need to be." The room went still. No one moved. No one spoke. And for the first time since I had arrived, I felt something shift. Not everything, but enough. The lawyer stepped aside and gestured toward the room. "Please, let us begin." I walked past them without saying anything, but I could feel it, the tension, the resistance, the fact that whatever they had planned was no longer going to happen the way they expected. The conference room felt smaller once we were all inside, not physically, but in the way tension compresses space, making every movement feel deliberate and every silence louder than it should be. I took a seat near the end of the table, not close enough to be part of their circle, but not far enough to pretend I did not belong there. No one looked at me, but I could feel it, the irritation, the calculation, the shift in whatever plan they had walked in with. The lawyer sat down across from us, placed a folder on the table, and adjusted his glasses with slow, practiced precision. Before he opened anything, he spoke. "Before we begin, I want to clarify something." His voice was calm, measured, the kind of tone that did not invite interruption. No assets or ownership interests should have been transferred prior to this reading. It was a simple statement, but it landed heavier than anything that had been said so far. I watched my uncle out of the corner of my eye. His posture tightened, just slightly. "We have not finalized anything," he said quickly. The lawyer did not argue. He simply nodded. "We will address that if necessary." That was the first crack, small, but visible. Then he opened the folder. "I will now read the final will and testament of Richard Carter." The words that followed were formal, legal, detached. Dates, clauses, definitions. I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting. To my father sitting by the window, to the way he had been writing things down, to the things he chose not to say. If something ever feels off. I forced myself back to the present. The lawyer continued. Specific assets were listed first: properties, accounts, investments. Names followed: my sister, my cousin, my uncle. Each of them received something. Not everything, but enough to make it look balanced. I could feel the tension in the room easing. They were starting to relax, starting to believe that whatever they had expected was unfolding exactly the way they wanted. Then the lawyer paused, just long enough to make everyone look up. "There is one additional provision," he said. The room stilled again. My uncle leaned forward slightly. "With regard to the controlling interest of Carter Medical Group." That was when everything shifted. I did not know it yet, but I felt it. "The entirety of that interest is to be transferred to Ethan Carter." Silence. Not the kind that fills a room, the kind that removes sound entirely. For a second, no one reacted, like their minds had not caught up to what they had just heard. Then it hit. "That is not possible." My sister's voice, sharp, immediate. "There must be a mistake." "There is no mistake," the lawyer replied. My cousin let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "He is not even part of the company." My uncle did not speak right away. He just stared at the lawyer, then at me, then back at the document in front of him. "This does not make sense," he said finally. "It does," the lawyer replied, "if you read the full document." He turned a page. "There is also a letter to accompany this decision." He reached into the folder and pulled out an envelope. My name was written on it, in my father's handwriting. For a moment, I did not move. My hands felt heavier than they should have. "Mr. Carter," the lawyer said gently. I stood up and took the envelope. The room felt different now, not tense in the same way, unstable, like something solid had just been pulled out from underneath it. I sat back down slowly and opened it. The paper inside was folded once, carefully, deliberately. I recognized the way he used to write immediately, not rushed, not uneven, precise. "My son, if you are reading this, then everything has likely unfolded the way I expected. I know this may not make sense to everyone in that room, but it should make sense to you. I have spent the past year paying attention, not to what people say, but to what they do when they believe I no longer have anything to offer them. You showed up when there was nothing to gain. You stayed when there was nothing to take. You listened when I did not have answers. The others showed me something different. Not cruelty, not openly, but priority. And priorities reveal more than intentions ever will. This decision is not about who understands the business. It is about who understands people. You will be challenged. They will question this. They will question you. Do not let them define what this means. Everything you need is already in place. Trust that, and trust yourself. I stopped reading, not because there was more, but because I needed a second. The room was silent. No one said anything. No one interrupted. For the first time since I had walked in, no one tried to control what was happening. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I looked up. No one met my eyes. Not my sister, not my cousin, not even my uncle. The lawyer cleared his throat slightly. There is an additional matter we need to address. That pulled their attention back. He opened another folder. This document outlines a record of financial activity and asset movement over the past 18 months. My uncle leaned back. We are not discussing that here, he said. We are, the lawyer replied calmly, because it is directly relevant to the execution of this will. He slid a document across the table. I could not see everything from where I was sitting, but I saw enough. Numbers, dates, transfers. These records indicate that several accounts associated with Mr. Carter were accessed and modified prior to his passing. My sister shook her head. That is standard. We were helping manage things. Were those actions documented? The lawyer asked. No answer. My cousin spoke instead. We were acting in his best interest. That is not the question, the lawyer said. His tone did not change, but something about it made the room feel colder. Were those actions formally authorized and recorded? Another pause, longer this time. We had verbal approval, my uncle said. The lawyer nodded slightly. That will need to be verified. He placed another document on the table. There is also a record of items removed from Mr. Carter's residence. My sister's head snapped up. Removed? Yes, the lawyer said. Items of financial and personal value. My cousin leaned forward. This is being taken out of context. Context will be established, the lawyer replied. Then he looked directly at my uncle. All items listed here are to be returned within 14 days. The room shifted again. This time, it was not confusion. It was pressure. Real pressure. You cannot just make demands like that, my uncle said. I am not making demands, the lawyer replied. I am outlining legal obligations. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. For the first time, I saw something I had not seen before. Not control, not confidence. Uncertainty. And beneath it, something closer to concern. The meeting did not last much longer after that. There was nothing left to argue in that moment. No one wanted to stay in that room. Not after everything had changed. We stood up slowly. Chairs moved. Papers were gathered. But no one spoke to me. Not directly. Not yet. As we walked out into the hallway, I could feel it building. The reaction. It did not take long. Ethan, my uncle's voice. I stopped, turned. He was already walking toward me, my sister and cousin close behind him. His expression was different now, less controlled, more focused. We need to talk about this, he said. I held his gaze. There is nothing to talk about. There is a lot to talk about, he replied. You think this just stands? Like this? I thought about the letter, about the way my father had written those words, "You will be challenged." "I think it already does," I said. My sister stepped in. "This is not realistic," she said. "You have no experience running any of this." "That was not the requirement," I replied. "It should have been," my cousin added. There it was. Not grief, not loss. Control. Always control. "You are going to make mistakes," my sister said. "Maybe," I said, "but they will be mine." My uncle exhaled slowly. "This is going to get complicated," he said. "You do not want that." I nodded. "I think it already is." I turned before they could respond, walked down the hallway, into the elevator, and for the first time since I saw that email, I allowed myself to think one thing. They did not expect this, not even close. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone was already vibrating. Messages, missed calls, notifications stacking on top of each other. I did not open them, not yet, because I already knew what they would say. "Call me. We need to fix this. This is not right." One message stood out. "This will not hold up." I stared at it for a second longer than the others, because it told me exactly what I needed to know. They were not reacting. They were preparing. I got into my car and sat there for a moment. Quiet. Still. Because beneath everything that had just happened, there was something else. A realization that was just starting to take shape. This was not over. Not even close. And whatever came next was not going to be about family anymore. I did not call anyone back that day. Not my sister, not my uncle, not my cousin. I let the messages sit, unread, even as the notifications kept coming in waves. Because for the first time, I understood something clearly. If I responded emotionally, I would be playing their game, and I had no intention of doing that anymore. That night, I reread the letter. Not once, not twice. Over and over, until the words stopped feeling like a surprise and started feeling like instructions. You will be challenged. They will question this. Everything you need is already in place. That last line stayed with me, because if my father believed that, then whatever was coming next was not something he had left to chance. The next morning, I made one decision. I called the lawyer. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I was expecting your call." That alone told me enough. "They are going to challenge this," I said. "Yes," he replied, "they are." There was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty, just confirmation. "I need to understand what I am dealing with," I said. "You do," he agreed, "and you need to move quickly." I drove to his office an hour later. He already had documents spread across his desk when I arrived. Not just the will. More. Much more. "Your father was very thorough," he said, motioning for me to sit. I lowered myself into the chair, my eyes moving over the stacks of paper. "This is not just a will," he continued. "It is a prepared position." I looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means he anticipated resistance," the lawyer said, "and he prepared for it in advance." He opened the first folder. "These are financial records." I leaned forward slightly. Lines of numbers, dates, transfers. At first, it looked like any standard account activity. Then I noticed the pattern. Repeated withdrawals, transfers to accounts I did not recognize. "These were made over the last 18 months, he said. I felt something tighten in my chest. "Who authorized them?" He did not answer directly. "That is one of the questions we will be asking." That told me enough. I swallowed. They were already taking from him. Yes. No hesitation, no attempt to soften it, just a fact. And somehow, that made it worse, because it confirmed what I had only suspected before. This had not started recently. This had been happening while he was still alive, while he was still watching. The lawyer slid another document toward me. A visitor log. Names, dates, durations. I saw my name immediately, again and again, consistent, frequent. Then I saw theirs. Short visits, irregular, clusters around certain dates. What am I looking at? I asked. Patterns, he said. I frowned slightly. Your father documented who came to see him, how often, and how long they stayed. I leaned back slowly. He was tracking them. He was observing them, the lawyer corrected. There was a difference, and I was starting to understand it. He reached for another file. These are asset inventories. Lists of items, detailed, organized, descriptions, values, and next to some of them, notations. Removed, transferred, unaccounted. My chest tightened. They took things from the house, I said. Yes. Before he died? Yes. Again, no hesitation, just confirmation. I stared at the page for a long moment because it was no longer just about control. It was about action, deliberate, repeated, hidden. They thought no one would notice, I said quietly. The lawyer did not respond. He did not need to, because we both knew that was exactly what they had thought. He opened one more folder. This is where things become more significant. I leaned forward again. Inside were smaller documents, printouts, transcripts. Your father installed recording devices in certain areas of the house, he said. I froze. Recording devices? Yes. He slid one of the transcripts toward me. I scanned the first few lines. Voices, recognizable. My uncle, my sister, my cousin. We need to finalize this before anything changes. My stomach dropped. He is not going to push back at this point. I looked up slowly. He recorded them. He documented behavior, the lawyer said. Again, that distinction. Not emotional, not reactive. Structured, intentional. My mind went back to the small external drive I had seen, the one he never let out of his sight. That drive, I said. It has all of this. Yes. I exhaled slowly. Everything you need is already in place. For the first time, I understood what he meant. This was not a guess, not a suspicion. It was a record, a timeline, a system. I sat back in the chair, trying to process everything. They are going to deny this, I said. Of course, the lawyer replied. They have to. And if they do? Then we respond. I nodded slowly. What does that look like? Formal notices, he said. Requests for return of property, documentation of financial discrepancies, and, if necessary, litigation. Litigation. The word sat heavy in the air, because that was the line. The point where this stopped being a family issue and became something else entirely. I thought about my father again, about the way he had been watching, about the way he had chosen not to confront them directly. He had not tried to stop them. He had prepared for them. I am not going to argue with them, I said. Good, the lawyer replied. You should not. I am not going to explain myself. You do not need to. I nodded once. Then we do this properly. Yes, he said. We do. That afternoon, the first letters went out. Formal, precise. Requests for the return of specific items, documentation attached, deadlines included. Not suggestions, requirements. I did not tell my family. They found out on their own. My phone rang within hours. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. What are you doing? My uncle demanded. His voice was sharper than it had been at the office, more urgent. Handling things properly, I said. You are sending legal notices to your own family. I am asking for things to be returned. You are escalating this. I paused. No, I said quietly. I think it already was. There was silence on the line. Then his tone shifted, lower, more controlled. This is not going to end the way you think it will. I am not trying to end it, I said. I am responding to it. Another pause. Then the line went dead. My sister did not call. She sent messages, long ones, emotional. We can fix this. You are making a mistake. You are tearing the family apart. I read them, but I did not respond, because for the first time, I understood something clearly. I was not the one who broke anything. They had just assumed I would never notice. The next escalation came faster than I expected. A notification popped up on my phone that evening, a social media post from my cousin. I should not have opened it, but I did. Funny how some people suddenly care about family when there is money involved. No names, no direct accusation, but it did not need one. Anyone who knew us would understand exactly who it was about. I stared at the screen for a moment, then refreshed. Comments were already coming in, questions, speculation, people tagging me, drawing conclusions without knowing anything. I closed the app. But the damage was already there. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was not family. It was my supervisor. Ethan, she said carefully, I need to talk to you. My stomach tightened. What is going on? I asked. I received a call this afternoon, she said. A call from who? She hesitated. Someone who identified themselves as a relative of yours. I closed my eyes briefly. What did they say? They raised concerns about your conduct, she replied. What kind of concerns? That you may have exercised poor judgment in the field, that your decision-making could be compromised. For a moment, I could not speak, because that was not just an accusation. That was my job, my livelihood, my credibility. That is not true, I said finally. I did not think it was, she replied, but we still have to take it seriously. I nodded, even though she could not see me. I understand. We are going to review a few of your recent cases, she continued. Until then, I am going to have to place you on temporary leave. The words landed harder than anything that had happened so far, not because they were unexpected, but because they were calculated. This was not about money anymore. It was about pressure, about forcing me into a position where I would have to choose, fight or walk away. After the call ended, I sat in silence. The apartment felt smaller, quieter, heavier, because everything had changed again. The will, the evidence, the legal action, and now this. They were not just defending themselves, They were attacking. For a moment, I thought about stopping. Not because I believed them, but because I understood what continuing meant. This would get worse, before it got better. If it got better at all. I looked down at the envelope still sitting on the table. My father's handwriting. Steady. Certain. You will be challenged. I let out a slow breath, because he had known. He had known exactly how far this could go, and he had still chosen this. That mattered, more than anything they were saying, more than anything they were trying to do. I picked up my phone, scrolled to the lawyer's number, and paused for just a second, because I knew what this call meant. There was no going back after this. Then I pressed dial. When he answered, I did not hesitate. They have started targeting my job, I said. I expected that, he replied. Of course he did. Then we move forward, I said. Yes, he replied. Now we move forward, properly. And for the first time since all of this started, I stopped reacting and started preparing. The next few days moved differently. Not slower, not faster, more focused. Everything that had felt chaotic before now had structure. Every move had a purpose. Every response was planned before it was made. I did not go back to work. Not because I could not, because I chose not to rush it. If they wanted to turn my job into leverage, then I needed to make sure it stopped being a weakness. The lawyer introduced me to someone else that same afternoon. Her name was Sarah Donovan. She did not waste time. She did not try to make me comfortable. She reviewed everything in silence for almost 20 minutes before she said a single word. When she finally looked up, her expression did not change. This is strong, she said. I frowned slightly. Strong? Your father did not leave gaps, she replied. He built a case. There it was again. Not a will, not a decision. A case. She organized the documents into 3 separate stacks. Financial movement, she said, tapping the first. Unauthorized access and asset removal, she added, pointing to the second. Recorded behavior, she finished, resting her hand on the third. We do not present everything at once, she said. Why not? Because pressure works best in stages. I leaned back slightly. What does that look like? It looks like control, she replied. And for the first time since all of this started, I understood what that meant. Not reacting, not chasing, setting the pace. We sent out a second round of notices that same day, more detailed, more specific. Not just requests, formal documentation of discrepancies, references to financial records, mentions of recorded material. Deadlines tightened, language sharpened. They responded faster this time. My uncle called again. I let it ring twice before answering. This stops now, he said immediately. No, I replied. It continues. You are escalating something that does not need to be escalated. It already is, I said. There was a pause. Then his tone shifted again. Less aggressive, more calculated. We can resolve this privately. I almost smiled, because that was the first real sign of pressure. I am open to resolution, I said, but not to ignoring what has already happened. Silence. Then, you are making a mistake, he said quietly. I do not think I am, I replied. I ended the call before he could continue. My sister reached out again that evening. This time, it was a call. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Ethan, she said. Her voice was different, not sharp, not defensive. careful. We need to talk. We already are, I said. No, she replied. Not like this. I waited. This is getting out of control, she continued. You are involving lawyers. You are sending documents. This is not how family handles things. I looked around my apartment, at the envelopes still sitting on the table, at the papers spread out beside it. This is how it is being handled, I said. We can fix this, she insisted. We can sit down, go through everything, make adjustments. Adjustments? I repeated. You know what I mean. I did, and that was the problem. No, I said. I do not think I do. There was a pause, longer than before. We thought you were not interested, she said finally. In what? In any of this. I let out a small breath. You did not ask. Another pause, then, we assumed, she said. I know, I replied. That was the closest either of us came to honesty. After that, the call ended quickly. No resolution, no agreement. Just distance. The next step came 2 days later. Sarah scheduled a formal meeting. Neutral location, all parties present, legal representation required, no exceptions. I almost did not go. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew what it meant. This was the point where everything became official, where there was no more pretending this could go back to normal. But then I realized something. It had not been normal for a long time. So I went. They were already there when I arrived, my uncle, my sister, my cousin. And for the first time, they did not look certain. They looked prepared, but not confident. That mattered. Sarah did not waste time. She walked in, sat down, and opened a folder. Let us begin, she said. My uncle's lawyer started to speak. She raised her hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough to stop him. We will follow a structure, she said. He nodded, reluctantly. First question, she continued. She looked directly at my uncle. Were any financial transactions conducted on behalf of Richard Carter without formal documentation in the past 18 months? He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. No, he said. That was the first breakdown, small, but visible. Sarah nodded. Are you certain? Yes. She did not argue. She simply turned a page. Then let us clarify. She slid a document across the table. Bank transfers, dates, amounts, linked accounts. Silence. My uncle's lawyer leaned forward. We would need to review the context of these. You will, Sarah said. But first, we establish whether they exist. He did not respond, because they did. That was the second crack. Then she moved to the next point. Second question, she said. Were any physical assets removed from Mr. Carter's residence prior to the reading of the will? My sister spoke this time. No. More confident than my uncle had been. More immediate. Sarah nodded again. Then she reached for a remote. The screen behind her lit up. Video. Security footage. Time-stamped. Clear. My sister. Standing in my father's office, opening a drawer, removing something, placing it in her bag. The room went silent. Not tense, not uncertain. Exposed. That is not what it looks like, my sister said quickly. It is exactly what it looks like, Sarah replied. Another clip. My cousin, in the living room, carrying a box, looking over his shoulder before leaving. Another. My uncle, reviewing documents, signing something, without my father present. The air in the room changed completely. "No one told us we could not take things," my cousin said. "There was no restriction." "There was," Sarah said calmly. She slid another document forward, signed, dated, an authorization clause. No asset movement without formal approval. Silence again. Heavier this time, because this was no longer about interpretation. It was about fact. My uncle leaned forward. "You are misrepresenting this," he said. Sarah did not react. Instead, she opened the third file. "Final question," she said. "Were any decisions made under the assumption that Mr. Carter would not contest them?" No one answered, because they did not need to. She pressed another button. Audio. Clear. Recognizable. "He is not going to push back at this point. We finalize this before anything changes." I did not need to look at them to know what their faces looked like. I could hear it in the silence. That was the collapse. Not loud, not dramatic. Final. Because there was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to reinterpret. Nothing left to hide behind. Their lawyer cleared his throat. "We will need time to review this," he said. Of course they would. But it was already over. They knew it. We knew it. Everyone in that room knew it. The meeting ended shortly after. No raised voices, no last arguments. Just quiet. Heavy. Unavoidable. As we stood to leave, no one looked at me directly, but I could feel it. The shift. For the first time, they were not in control. And I was not the one trying to catch up. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, not because everything was resolved, but because the direction had changed, completely. The calls stopped after that. The messages slowed, then disappeared. A few days later, their lawyer reached out, not to challenge, to negotiate. Return of assets, withdrawal of any formal dispute, no public escalation. It did not take long. They agreed to everything, not because they wanted to, because they had to. The items were returned gradually, boxes left at the door, documents signed without conversation. No apologies, no explanations, just compliance. I did not expect anything else. A week later, I went back to work. The review had cleared. No issues, no concerns. My supervisor did not mention the call again. Neither did I, because that part was over too. The house felt different when I went back. Quieter, but not empty. Things were back where they belonged. Not exactly the same, but close enough. I stood in my father's office for a long time that day, looking at the desk, the drawers, the space where everything had been planned. He had seen it coming. All of it. Not because he was suspicious, because he was paying attention. And for the first time, I understood what that really meant. It was not about catching people doing something wrong. It was about seeing them clearly, without excuses, without assumptions. Just truth. I did not make any immediate changes to the business. I did not restructure anything. I did not replace anyone. Not yet. Because that was not the point. The point was not control. It was clarity. And once you have that, everything else becomes a choice, not a reaction. Some of them reached out eventually, carefully, slowly, testing. I did not respond right away. Not because I was angry, because I was deciding. For the first time in my life, I was not reacting to them. I was choosing what came next. And that made all the difference. I walked out of the house that evening and paused for a moment before getting into my car. The sun was setting, the light hitting the windows the same way it always had. Nothing looked different. But everything was. because the one thing that had never been clear before finally was. They thought I did not understand how their system worked. Turns out, I just did not want to become it.